So our next article comes from Only Sky Media and was written by Hemant Mehta on 5th of October 2022. So just as some people can be hypocritical, as we may have touched on slightly in the last article, some people can really push the boat in the other direction. And in our last article, got a bit of a good news article, because that tells us that a secular government caucus is coming to the Minnesota state legislature, thanks to 4 lawmakers who want to protect church-state separation and push back against the forces of Christian nationalism. This is a state with a democratic governor, even. But the 4 members, who will be joined by 20 of their colleagues, believe this is still a necessary step. The co-chairs stated that we are troubled by the efforts from some politicians to push a Christian nationalist agenda, where right-wing Christian politicians are attempting to break down the wall of separation between church and state in order to push their beliefs on others. Many others, like the 4 are named Representative Mike Freiberg, I can't do the American pronunciations, Representative Athena Hollins, Senator Jen McEwen, and Sen John McCarthy, stated that they were unhappy that the GOP majority Senate wanted to put "In God We Trust" posters in public schools. We may have covered that before on the nonprofits too. These are tactics of pushing back religious neutrality and viewpoints that are critical of conservative Christianity. It goes, as it usually does with conservative Christians, much further. And as usual with conservative Christians, it pushes the boundaries of anti-education. Cindy, what do you think?
I don't know if you've seen Biden's speech last weekend, but I'm going to paraphrase what he said, and quote. Let me start off with 2 words: about damn time. He said that, and made in America, and so that made the joke. The Christo-fascists have been working on turning the U.S. in a theocracy for at least 30 years, and that's a generous number.
Very
And now
generous.
that there's a SCOTUS that's not afraid of saying that they are deeply religious, and they are not afraid of using this religious influence, some people in one state are troubled. Man, the entire world is watching, fearing that what will happen in the next 2 years, and you are just troubled. You should be angry. You should be scared. You should be fighting for your life, because it may depend on it. Never, ever in the history of humanity has a theocracy been or turned out to be a happy, peaceful, or proper country. Never. That never happened. And that's not going to happen because the US is a magical country. The US is the greatest country on earth. No, that will not happen.
No, it won't. I want to point out Richard's favorite word in this episode, which is hypocrisy. So the Christians that have the majority in this nation, we always hear about the Second Amendment. We hear all the time about the Second Amendment, or if we hear about the First Amendment, it's usually in the form of freedom of speech, which they don't understand either. But it's always about my guns. Let me keep my guns. And it's so annoying. But then I'm like, okay, so you skipped over the First Amendment. You don't even really understand that one, because in the First Amendment, if you read really closely, there's this thing called the Establishment Clause. And that means that the U.S. does not have a national religion. And they always forget that. So I don't know why this is like such a big, wow, they want to make a secular government caucus. It's like, yeah, weren't we supposed to be doing that this whole time? Wasn't that like the whole point? Wasn't that the whole point? I'm so confused, but I just think it's hilarious how they just skip right over the First Amendment, or at least, it's like when your teacher tells you to read part of a textbook and then you just go, and you skim the first few sentences and think you know it. Well, no, you don't know the First Amendment and you want to skip over to the second, but then you forget that the U.S. is not a Christian nation by any stretch of the imagination. So one thing I always would love to ask these people is, you want to push a Christian government, you want to make a theocracy, a Christian theocracy. And not only that, a lot of them want a like fundamentalist Christian theocracy, which is so much worse. Handmaid's Tale, anybody? But anyway, what if the Church of Satan was wanting to come into the government and lead our government? I think they would start listening to the Establishment Clause. I think they would say, no, how dare you put in Satan we trust? Isn't there freedom of religion? Well, freedom of religion is freedom from religion. So if you wouldn't want a Buddhist putting shit in your schools, or Muslims putting shit in your schools, or Satanists putting shit in your schools, or even just mending into government wherever, then everybody should be happy about this. Every American should be happy about this. I don't understand why this shouldn't even be a news article, because it should have happened in our friggin' founding. But anyway, Richard.
I'm going to push, and I think it's very important that everybody writes in and makes this happen, that the next non-profits t-shirt has somewhere on it, Maguns. I think it's necessary. Right, okay, so the mission statement for the new caucus reads: promote public policy based on reason, science, and moral values, protect the secular character of our government by adhering to the constitutional principle of separation of church and state, oppose discrimination against atheists, agnostics, humanists, seekers, religious and non-religious people, championing freedom of thought and conscience, and provide a forum for Minnesota legislators to discuss their moral frameworks, ethical values, and personal religious journeys. And before the Christians start screaming about atheists this and atheists that, at least one member of the core signatures is a theist. Cindy, do you want to wrap us up on this one?
Yeah, I just want to go to the same direction as August by pointing out that I think most of SCOTUS is Catholic, and most of the senators are on the other side. So if we want to install a theocracy, is it going to be a Catholic one, or a Methodist one, or a Calvinist one, or which version? Which version? Before it even gets to decide which one, it will be messy and never going to work.
Right. And I think that's a great point, Cindy. I just want to point out the fact that atheists can be secular humanists. They can want to be skeptical. And when I think of secular, I just think of not influenced by religion or dogma, or it reminds me of critical thinking and, hey, let's assess what we actually have, because atheism says nothing about morality or anything. It just says, hey, I don't believe in a God. There are plenty of immoral atheists. But I think the secular part of it, I don't want an atheist government. I want a secular government. I want us to be free from religion, to practice religion or to not, whatever you choose.